Very few people grow up on working farms or ranches anymore. The way that the food is sold in the grocery store, animal foods, it disguises the fact that it came from an animal. They don't leave the feed on. There's no blood. And people have become grossed out by it.
Yeah.
You have a lot more vegetarians who just sort of get grossed out by the idea of eating meat or eating animals. And it's too bad. And if you take a visit to a farm, if you go to Eastern Market and talk to some of the farmers there, that's a great way to start getting back in touch with where our food comes from. And then it's less gross because you see the farm, you know how the animal is fed and treated, and you look it in the eye. So.
Right. Well, I think your book is great because you describe, where it goes from. I mean, how we got to where we are today. You talk about the history, and I just have to tell the audience. Everybody, John is a Harvard graduate. He's brilliant. He went to Harvard, and you did a lot of research for this book. You're incredibly intelligent, so everything that you have to say is valuable, valid information that I think people should really pay attention to.
Well, thank you. I have 20 pages of footnotes and citations to academic papers, and I'm sure nobody is going to read them, but I spent a lot of time.
Yes.
I spent weeks on them.
Yeah.
No, a lot of health and diet books out there are very poorly researched, or they don't have a lot of citations, so you can't check it if you disagree with something. And there's really a study that says anything. You can find a study that says anything.
Right.
So I tried to, I really tried to take a scientific approach here, and if people do disagree with parts, well, they can find the studies that I cited and tell me why I'm wrong.
Right, yeah. And I love that, and it's very easy to read, and I told you I haven't read that much yet. I am on my way. I'm reading a couple different books right now, but I have started reading it. And even just the beginning, I love the fact that you bring in humor, and you talked about the caveman lawyer from Saturday Night Live.
Right. Well, I start with the caveman jokes because everybody starts there.
Yeah.
And whether it's the Geico commercials or
yes.
Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer
Yes.
on Saturday Night Live, or even the Flintstones, we have this cartoonish version of the Paleolithic and the Stone Age. And I really try to immediately move beyond that and look at what proper paleoanthropologists have to say about the past. And the book, the book isn't just about the Paleolithic. I think a lot of people hear the title, the Paleo Manifesto, they hear about the caveman diet, and they think it's going to be a book that's just about hunter-gatherers in the Paleolithic, and it has a list of foods that you can and can't eat, and boom.
Right.
And it's really not that. It reads more like if I'm not as good of a writer as Malcolm Gladwell, but it reads more like if Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about health. And so the story starts in the Paleolithic, and I get this great tour of the Harvard Fossil Archive. And Harvard has this amazing fossil collection of ancient human bones. And I learned from the chair of human evolutionary biology at Harvard about how hunter-gatherers actually were fairly healthy. They weren't perfectly healthy, but they had, I got to hold an 80,000-year-old skull.
Really?
With a beautiful set of teeth. His jaw was large enough that his wisdom teeth came in. All his teeth came in straight. He had no cavities. He did have one abscess and lost a tooth, but relative to the farmers that came afterwards, and we get to look at those skulls and bones too, he was much taller, had a thicker bone structure, far fewer cavities, and had more teeth. So we start in the Paleolithic, and I learn about that lifestyle, but the story really continues on from there. And I talk about some revolutions in how humans lived. First, the agricultural revolution, and then the agricultural age, and then the industrial revolution and the industrial age, and the digital revolution and the information age. And so I'll give a very quick snippet of each of these. The chapter on the agricultural age is really about the Bible and what we can learn really from Judaism and the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. A lot of people have read parts of Genesis and Exodus, and then if they're Christian, they usually skip to the New Testament.
Right.
But if you go back and you actually read Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, a lot of it is about hygiene and how to avoid infectious disease.
Really?
There are 3 injunctions to wash your hands in the Bible. This is millennia before the discovery of hand washing in the late 19th century or mid 19th century. And Jewish priests had to wash their hands. People had to wash their hands after touching a corpse, which is very prudent advice.
Yeah.
And so I talk about how a lot of these biblical rules emerged as a way to help people avoid the greatest health problem of the era, which was infectious disease. Because everybody was living in cities without sewers and they didn't understand germs or know that they existed. It was a really filthy time. So I write about that. The Industrial Age chapter is about what we can learn from the British. They were the first to go through the Industrial Revolution. And so they suffered a lot of health problems as a result. The British have a reputation for having lousy teeth.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think, that's not a 20th century phenomenon. The British reputation for having lousy teeth stretches back hundreds of years to when they were the first group of people to have a lot of refined sugar in their diet. And so they started taking all the sugar with the tea that they were drinking, and a lot of working class Brits started to be able to afford sugar, and cavities took off, and cavities and dental problems were rampant. The British were also the first to suffer from a condition called rickets. Rickets is when you have a severe vitamin D deficiency, particularly in children. A lot of people, when they've heard of rickets, they think of pictures of children in tenement houses, poor-looking children in tenement houses with crooked bones. It's a very painful disease. Rickets used to be called the British disease because it appeared there first, and it appeared among the rich, the children of the rich first, because they were wealthy enough to not work in the fields. If you work in the fields, you get plenty of sun and you get plenty of vitamin D.
Right.
But they were wealthy enough to stay indoors, so they didn't get any vitamin D. Their diet didn't have a lot of vitamin D in it. London and the UK is notoriously cloudy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of air pollution.
Right.
And all of the aspiring merchants, the upper middle class, they wanted to have very pale skin because the aristocracy had pale skin.
Right. It was a representation of wealth.
Right. Right, and Queen Elizabeth was notoriously pale. Notoriously pale. It's where we get the term blue bloods. So blue bloods are people whose skin is so light and translucent that you can see their veins through their skin and it looks a little blue.
Really?
Yeah, so this aristocratic ideal really started there. And so that chapter talks about what we can learn from the Brits. And so there's a whole lot more besides just the Paleolithic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's fascinating. Really, I think that especially because things have become so mainstream, and if people can really understand why things are the way they are, it can help them in so many ways, and it can help them be healthier by understanding. I mean, I had never heard that about the Brits.
Yeah.
And sugar. I never knew about that, and I haven't read the whole book yet. So that'll interest me.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to know this information.
Well, and you're right. It's a book about why, and it starts with why. And the first third of the book it's not about telling people how to be healthy. It's about where we come from.
Right.
And then we get into practical, sensible advice.
Yeah, and why is my favorite question.
Yes.
It always has been, and because if you understand it, if you understand things, you can live a healthier lifestyle. You'll be happier.
Yeah, and so many dietary rules today, they're just arbitrary lists of foods.
Yeah.
They're not meaningful to people.
Right.
Calories, not meaningful to people. Running on a treadmill and counting your calories, not meaningful. And when it's not meaningful, people stop doing it. They stop caring about it. They stop doing it. So if you want people to follow a healthy lifestyle on an ongoing basis, you have to make it meaningful to them. So I try to make the story about what it means to be human.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about this at your book signing yesterday. You were talking about running on a treadmill, and you said if you run the same distance on a treadmill,
on a flat surface
Yeah.
at the same speed, at the same distance, you will get good at running in a straight line on a flat surface for the same distance at the same speed.
Right.
We had this odd notion that if you just do jogging, then it will magically translate into all-round fitness. But if all you do is jog, you may have trouble if you need to bend over and pick up something heavy,
Right.
or even pick up your grandkids.
Yeah.
So we really need to have a broader notion of fitness, and it'll be more fun that way too,
Yeah.
and less
And-
boring.
John, I can't believe this. We only have a couple minutes left, but I want people to know where. I know you said people can find their book everywhere, but can you talk about the website that you have?
Yeah, so my website is huntergatherer.com,
Okay.
and so that folks can visit there, and I have additional resources if you're interested in getting started and some summary guidelines. And then they can find the book, like we mentioned, at Barnes & Noble or Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Right. Well, I really think it's fascinating, and I think it's something that people need to understand. They need to know, and especially, being a girl. Like when I was in college, we all talked about, vegan hasn't been popular until
Right.
the last couple of years, but vegetarian, being vegetarian, and people just want to lose weight.
Right.
It's like, well, I mean, if you really understand the basics.
Go look at there are no obese wild animals.
Yeah, very true.
Right? Animals that eat their natural diet are not obese. And we need to get over this notion of calories and that fat causes people to be fat, and start eating real foods and whole foods, and getting back to human, basically.
Right. And you have inspired me to try things that scare the life out of me. So I feel bad we have to wrap up the interview, but John, I want to thank you so much for coming on this show today.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Good. It was fun for me too. And just, being friends in high school, I never thought in a million years.
I never thought in a million years.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it's wonderful. You're really helping people. So thank you, John.
Thank you.
So thank you for watching, and please look up the Paleo Manifesto. You won't be disappointed. This is Lauren Parrott. We'll see you next time.